As you move into your 70s, something subtle but powerful begins to shift. The need to impress others, to fit into social circles, or to keep friendships just to feel accepted starts fading away. You've lived enough life to understand that approval was always temporary, and often it came at the cost of your own peace. Now, the weight of those expectations finally starts lifting. Many people over 70 describe this phase as the first time they genuinely breathe for themselves. Take Mrs. Hale, a retired teacher who spent decades trying to keep everyone satisfied. Friends, family, colleagues. If someone needed help, she was the first to volunteer. If someone disagreed, she tried to soften the conflict. But once she crossed 70, she began realizing she no longer needed to prove anything. Not her kindness, not her loyalty, not her worth. One morning, she told her daughter, "I think I spent half my life trying to be liked." And that sentence quietly explained everything. She wasn't bitter, just honest. Age had finally released her from the invisible pressure to maintain social harmony. This is the freedom that often comes with growing older. You stop chasing people who barely meet you halfway. You stop explaining yourself to those who never understood you. You stop feeling guilty for choosing quiet afternoons instead of crowded gatherings. Not because you dislike people, but because you no longer need external validation to feel complete. You begin valuing your authenticity over anyone's opinion. And for the first time, your life starts belonging entirely to you. As we grow older, the body speaks in quieter ways than it once did. A heart attack after 60 rarely begins with a dramatic, crushing pain. Instead, it often starts with signals so subtle that many seniors mistake them for indigestion, fatigue, or simply a long day. But recognizing these early warnings can become the difference between life-threatening damage and a chance to survive with strength and clarity. One of the most common early signs is a heavy, squeezing pressure in the chest. Not sharp, not stabbing, but as if someone placed a warm weight right in the center. Many seniors describe it as tightness, fullness, or a strange, uncomfortable pressure that doesn't feel normal. It might come and go or stay constant. Even mild pressure should never be ignored. Another warning is unusual shortness of breath. If simple movements suddenly feel harder, walking across a room, climbing a few steps, or standing up from a chair, it could mean the heart is struggling to pump effectively. Seniors often assume they are just tired. But when breathing becomes shallow or forced without clear reason, the heart may be calling for attention. Some signs appear outside the chest entirely. Pain spreading to the jaw, neck, back, shoulders, or left arm is especially common after 60. Can feel like soreness, tingling, or even a dull ache. Many seniors wake up thinking they slept awkwardly, not realizing their heart was signaling distress. Then there is an unexplained wave of fatigue, the kind that hits suddenly, without warning, even when you haven't done anything exhausting. Women over 60 experience this symptom very frequently. And finally, the body may create a sense of impending doom, a deep inner feeling that something is wrong. This isn't panic. It's your nervous system reacting to reduced blood flow. When your body speaks this quietly, it's not trying to scare you. It's trying to protect you. And learning to listen is the first step to survival. By the time you reach your 70s, you've already carried decades of responsibilities. Family needs, work pressures, community roles, and the emotional weight of relationships that demanded more than they gave. When you're young, you believe friendships should be held onto no matter what. You forgive easily, you compromise often, and you convince yourself that keeping every connection alive is a sign of loyalty. But later in life, you start recognizing how much emotional energy you spent managing other people's moods, expectations, and disappointments. Consider Mrs. Vernon, who always prided herself on being the dependable friend. She listened to everyone's problems, offered advice, mediated conflicts, and stretched herself thin just to maintain harmony. For years, she thought this made her a good friend. But after turning 72, she began to notice something she had ignored. She felt tired, not appreciated. People came to her for comfort but rarely asked how she was doing. One evening, after a long phone call filled with complaints she didn't have the strength to absorb anymore, she quietly admitted, I don't think these friendships feel like friendships anymore. That realization didn't make her bitter. It made her free. She slowly allowed the demanding connections to fade, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. With fewer people in her circle, her days felt lighter. She wasn't constantly worried about who needed her attention or who might be upset. She no longer carried problems that weren't hers. The space that opened up wasn't empty. It was peaceful. This is the gift of choosing fewer friendships. You protect your emotional energy. You create room for your own thoughts, your own healing, your own joy. And you discover that life becomes gentler when you stop carrying weight that was never meant for you. Reaching your 70s changes the way you view time. When you were younger, it felt endless, something you could give away freely. You tolerated difficult personalities, stayed in draining friendships, and attended gatherings out of obligation because you believed there would always be more chances, more seasons, more years. But as you grow older, time becomes clearer, sharper, even. You begin to understand that every hour you spend should matter, and every person you allow into your day should bring something meaningful, not exhaustion. Take Mr. Dalton, who spent most of his life trying to keep old friendships alive simply because they had history. Even when those friends constantly argued, complained, or belittled him, he convinced himself that abandoning the connections would be disloyal. But once he stepped into his 70s, he felt a shift. The long conversations that once felt tolerable now felt heavy. The unpredictable moods of others drained his limited energy. One afternoon, after cutting short a tense visit, he sat quietly at home and thought, "Why am I giving my remaining years to people who don't bring me peace?" That question changed everything. He slowly reduced the time he spent around those who left him feeling smaller. Instead, he used his days in ways that genuinely fed his spirit. Simple walks, small routines, quiet joys he once postponed. This is the truth many discover later in life. Your time is no longer something to trade for approval or habit. You honor it by sharing it with people who respect it, or by keeping it for yourself when that feels right. Some truths only become clear later in life, and one of the most surprising is how comforting your own company can be. In your younger years, solitude often felt like something to avoid. Being alone was mistaken for being lonely, and you filled your schedule with people, conversations, and plans just to keep that feeling away. But by the time you reach your 70s, solitude begins to take on a different shape. It becomes gentler, safer, almost warm. Think of Ms. Ellis, who spent decades relying on others to feel connected. She always believed that happiness came from being surrounded by friends, from lively conversations and shared plans. But after retiring and slowing down, she found herself spending more time alone than ever before. At first, she worried it meant her life was shrinking. But slowly, she began noticing something different. She wasn't uncomfortable in the quiet. She wasn't searching for noise. She was finally getting to know the version of herself she had never had time to meet. She discovered small routines that brought her joy. Morning tea by the window, slow walks through her neighborhood, afternoons spent writing down memories she had long forgotten. The more time she spent with herself, the more she realized that her own presence was steady, calm, and reliable. It didn't demand explanations. It didn't set expectations. It didn't drain her. It simply allowed her to exist in peace. With age comes the understanding that the relationship you build with yourself is the only one guaranteed to stay. When you learn to enjoy your own thoughts, your own silence, and your own rhythm, you stop fearing being alone. You start valuing it. In this stage of life, companionship isn't about how many people you have around you. It's about how comfortable you feel within your own heart. By the time you reach your 70s, you begin to understand that life isn't defined by how many people you hold on to, but by how lightly you can carry your days. Letting go of draining friendships, old expectations, outdated roles doesn't make your world smaller. It makes it clearer. You stop trying to rescue relationships that no longer fit. You stop carrying emotional debts that were never repaid. And slowly, you create space for the kind of life that feels honest, peaceful, and deeply your own. Consider Mrs. Latham, who spent years clinging to friendships out of habit rather than joy. She feared that stepping away would leave her isolated. But as time passed, She noticed that holding on was costing her more than letting go ever would. One evening, after ending a long conversation filled with negativity, she no longer had the strength to absorb. She sat in her living room and realized, I'm not losing people. I'm losing weight I was never meant to carry. In the months that followed, she didn't replace those friendships with new ones. Instead, she replaced them with a lighter heart, a calmer mind, and a renewed sense of self. Her life wasn't lonelier. It was fuller. The absence of unnecessary noise made room for things she had always postponed. Small hobbies, quiet mornings, meaningful reflections, and a deeper connection with her own values. This is what letting go truly offers. It's not an ending. It's an opening. It gives you the freedom to shape your days without pressure, to choose peace without explanation, and to grow without needing approval. At this age, life becomes richer not because of who stays with you, but because of what finally leaves your shoulders.